Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Beyond Terrain podcast. I'm joined today by Clayton for episode 14. Um, Cole has a super interesting career path right now, I think, and I stumbled upon his work there on social media, and it really just resonated right off the bat with me. And he works closely with one of his friends there in the field of holistic dentistry, and Cole himself is an osteopath, but um, certainly well versed in a lot of topics, I think, and I definitely want to get into that today with him. So, Cole, thank you for joining me today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so like I said earlier, I always ask my guests to kind of define what health is, what health means to them, and this obviously gives us a good baseline to work off of. So, what does health mean to you? What does that look like?
Ah, you know what it is for me? It's pretty simple. It's just about sustainability, right? I'm not talking about
Mm,
um, ecological sustainability. I'm talking about actual health, longevity sustainability. So, me myself included, a lot of people find one path and then they go, "Phew, like hell for leather down that. I'm going to become carnivore and I'm only gonna eat meat and I'm gonna make sure I watch every sunrise and then but now I'm gonna do hit training, but now I'm gonna do only cardio and do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
we tend to, which is normal, like we tend to find these things, latch onto it for a few months and then or a year or even 18 months or 2 years. It depends on how strong the philosophy is. And then we go, I don't think that was actually the answer. And then we go to the next thing, yeah. So for me, like health is that sustainability in the long term. Like, don't tell me what you're doing this next set of 6 weeks. Tell me how you're going to be in 10 years. You know, because it's easy to be in your 20s and be healthy. You can you can be in your 20s and get on the sauce every couple days and eat a
no
few
problem.
hamburgers and stuff like that and still go to the gym and look buff, right? But it's like, all right, let me see how you are when you're 47. So you know
Yeah,
um, that's what I define as health. Someone that has a way of life, a way of living that's sustainable in the long term, that actually works. So
mm,
I'm just thinking about the guy that lived at the end of our street when I grew up. Well, it wasn't really a street. Grew up in the country, so it was a country road, right? So this
yeah.
is old Bob Worcester. That was his name. So he used to get up every morning at 4 a.m. and go and milk the cows, right? So he ran a dairy. So this guy lived till he was 85. The year before he died, he was competing in the wood chop. You got wood chop in Canada?
Oh yeah, yeah. Big, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you know what it is. Like you get a real sharp axe, stand on a log of hardwood, and our hardwood down here in Australia is like lives up to its name. It's like concrete, right? So you stand there and bang, 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 and you chop to time and to
Hmm.
handicap. Anyway, Bob, he was still doing the wood chop at 84 in the show. He died the year after at 85,
Yeah,
but like he didn't have really any health problems, but he wasn't like necessarily, he didn't have a six-pack or anything. He was pretty solidly built, probably had a drink or
sure.
two, but what was it? It was the sustainability, like every morning he got up 4 a.m., milk the cows, chop some wood, like it's simple and sustainable and it worked. So
Yeah.
that's how I see it.
Yeah, longevity is definitely a part of my definition of health too, and I love that story. Um, and I was fishing lobster there a couple of years ago, and the captain of the boat was telling me about his mother actually, who she would captain the boat and she would run the hauler, so you'd pull the lobster traps up on this kind of hauler, right? The spinning wheel, and it would pull these traps up. The traps are about 100 pounds or so, and you'd have to kind of pull them onto the boat, and then fella would pull them down. Anyway, he's telling me that his mother, at 86 years old, would fish with him every season up until she passed away. So similar story, and that's really for me, it's longevity. And then when I think of longevity too, you got to think, okay, well, is longevity living to be 130, or is it living to 85 and being able to jump around and be in good health and milk the cows in the morning and do your daily,
that,
like,
man,
do what you want to do, right?
yeah, because my grandma lived till she was 99, but the last 7 years of that, she lived sitting in a chair, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
is that healthy? Probably not, you know. What she probably would have tapped out around 85, 86, because she had some right side heart failure, but they put a pacemaker in, you know. So it's like
oh yeah,
then you start going down that train of intervention and stroke, and then you know being incapacitated and sitting in a chair literally for 7 years. You know, can't move the
yeah,
arm, can't hold the head properly, can't walk properly, all that stuff. So that's not
sure,
really healthy. But like pulling in lobsters or milking the cows at 86 and then dying, that's healthy. You know.
yeah, I agree. Yeah. And maybe a certain amount, I guess it gets a little, um, it depends on what you want too. But I know, like, I could probably sit around for a couple years if I had lots of grandkids to entertain me, right? But, I might get tiresome after a while. But,
Yeah,
um,
well,
yeah, that's super cool.
you can go right into that, and because Stephen Kotler, he's written a book about that. You know, have you looked at his work much?
No, I don't think so. Stephen Kotler, you said?
Yeah, flow science guy. So he says you've got to do physically challenging uh, things like things that challenge you physically and mentally
Mm,
in novel environments, preferably socially as well. So whether
mm.
that be like hiking in the woods in a new place with a group, or in his case, he learnt skiing with some friends and stuff when he was,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know, 50 something. He learnt freestyle skiing, but he wrote a book about that called Nah Country. And yeah, that's what he found the key to like successful aging was. So maybe that, you know, hauling in lobster pots with a group of people in novel environments, a novel environment, the sea's always changing.
That's it. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
she's already
So
onto
you
it.
said it was something physically and then something mentally as well. Was there ever a spiritual component talked about there?
I don't think so.
I
Not
think so.
really.
No.
Stephen Kotler doesn't really go into that sort of stuff too much. Yeah,
Sure.
I do. You can talk to me about that.
Yeah. What do you think then? What are your thoughts there? Do you think that plays a role into longevity at all?
Maybe like longevity is not really my topic. Sustainability, it was just in terms of like what health is, but yeah, like I think having well the work that I do. There's a slide that my mentor put up when he was teaching us as a group, and it was this lady sitting with a lion, and it said if you don't have a spiritual fulcrum, it's very hard to do this work, which is like cranial osteopathy, you know, like working real gently with the head and with the body's mechanisms. So I think that's true in life. So like you have to have some uh, fulcrum, some sort of balance point that gives you perspective. You know what I mean? That's a big
Mm,
part of the sustainability. So like running hell for leather to become like an internet entrepreneur and sleeping 4 hours a night and all that sort of stuff. It's all cool, like it's popular, right? Um,
yeah.
but really, what's the point of that? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's the actual you know, when you've finished your life and you're looking back, are you gonna essentially look back and go, yeah, that was cool. Like I really affected some people's lives there, or I really made a big difference in this area or that area, because that's really what spirituality is. Saint Francis of Assisi said that it's about finding out. Essentially, what he said is find out what you're good at, get good at it, and use it for the service of other people. That's all you have to do. It's simple as that. But if we look around, like how many people are actually doing that? People get stuck in jobs they hate. They eating crap food, they're getting shit sleep, you know, they're not actually fulfilling themselves, let alone finding what they're good at, let alone using that as service for others. Why? Because that's hard. It's actually really hard work. Like spiritual path is difficult work
Yeah.
because you're gonna
Well
have
put.
to challenge yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great perspective actually, and really does put it in perspective. Um, yeah, that's fantastic. So I guess, now might be a good time to get into, I know you're really into the breathwork side of things too, and maybe we can kind of touch on osteopathy because it's something we really haven't talked about yet. So generally, what's your philosophy when it comes to osteopathy, and maybe you could talk a little bit about your journey on how you got onto that path and everywhere it's taken you.
Yeah, that's a long story. Well, so the definition of osteopath is it's an old joke. The definition of osteopath is disagreement. Um, so um, there's a couple of schools in osteopathic thought. There's one that we should be like a manual therapy, like physiotherapy or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
there's another one that we should be exclusive, and that osteopathy is an old tradition and should be upheld, and so on. And there's somewhat of a middle way, but most osteopaths, like if you present them with a neck pain, pretty much everyone will treat it differently. You still get
Sure.
good result, but everyone's got a different idea. So that's cool. Like I don't really get involved with that, like live and let live. But what I do is mostly focused on cranial osteopathy. I do a little bit of general stuff too because of my background. So I do work fairly closely with breathing because it's one of the key elements in traditional osteopathy actually. So
Hmm.
I do like myofascial work. I do what we call MET work, which is real structural sort of stuff. So what we call structural osteopathy, with like hands-on manual therapy. But then a
Sure.
lot of what I do is what we call cranial, or what's properly termed osteopathy in the cranial field. So that was started by a guy called William Garner Sutherland, who was a student of the guy who started osteopathy, who was called A.T. Still, who was a medical doctor that was disenfranchised with the system. And so he kind of looked into anatomy basically and studied anatomy and figured out ways that how the body worked and what ways to, if we use your word, alter the terrain so that it worked better, basically. So
Mm,
flows better, or um, there's better joint alignment, so there's better neural inputs and so on. So that's how he looked at things. And then Sutherland was sort of standing in front of this skull, and he literally had a voice in his head that said, beveled like the gills of a fish, built for an articular respiratory motion. And he was like, no, the skull doesn't move. That's not built for motion. So he spent about 30 years trying to prove to himself that the skull didn't move. But in doing that, he found out that the skull moves and how it moves and how the bones articulate and how they create strains and patterns and so on and so on. So he spent like a long time figuring it all out. He almost knocked himself off a few times. He passed out. His wife found him out cold in his
my
study with
goodness.
a football helmet on or something. Like the rumor goes, the stories go. So anyway, he taught some people. In the end of his career, he taught people, traveled around America with a series of charts and stuff, and taught people what he'd found. And then So they picked up on that, and then they taught some people, and those people taught some people, and that generation taught me. So, like, while I was at university studying osteopathy in the academic sense, I was also studying classical osteopathy or cranial osteopathy in like small group study groups with a guy called George. So he'd been taught by the people that were taught by the masters that were taught by the master and the master originally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like I kind of take pride in that in a way. Like it's a direct lineage, and I guess it's relatively new. It's been around since the 50s, um,
Sure.
but it's a totally different way of looking at things. It's actually based on anatomy. People think it's sort of this woo thing where you're sitting there, holding someone's head and being really, really still. But it's actually based on anatomical principles. So what we're really trying to do is get the cerebral spinal fluid moving properly and moving well, and or moving, let's say, moving unobstructed. So that's the fluid that flows between your brain and your spinal cord. Um, and there's different mechanisms to that, which we can go into if you want, but I'll skim it now. And that then once you've got that moving, then you want to move to what we call secondary respiration. So we call breathing secondary respiration. How about that?
Mm,
We call the movement of cerebral
love it.
spinal fluid primary respiration. So
Sure.
yeah, CSF breathing, and then through doing that, you get circulation improved. Yeah, so blood
Mm,
flow, CSF, blood flow, airflow, and CSF flow. So if you can get those things unobstructed, you know, the person's going to feel better. It doesn't even really matter what stage of health or life they're at. I treated my dad with cranial osteopathy like 3 days before he died, and he said he really liked it. You know?
wow.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what I do, and how I came to that was long and convoluted. Just through. I mean, I'm originally trained in art, like painting, drawing, and then I did some
Cool.
PT, and then there was another wild Canadian actually called Paul Check. You might have heard of Paul. You heard of Paul
Sure.
Check?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, you'd love him. Um, so I came across him many years ago, his work at a fitness conference, and I was like, right, okay, this guy's actually making sense, because not many people in fitness. That was back in the early 2000s. Not many people in fitness actually made sense. They're just talking
Sure.
about,
Okay.
how to lift weights and where to put your knees and all that sort of stuff. And Paul came in and just his stuff was way, way, way advanced for that time. Um, and he was using the Swiss balls and rotation, and it just made a lot of sense to me. I was like, well, this is where I want to be, because this guy actually talking, you know, sense and health as well. So he's big on organic
Yeah.
food and light and sleep and breathing and that sort of stuff. So he's a holistic sort of health practitioner before it was real big and mainstream. So I
Yeah.
studied with him for a long time. But then I
Cool.
kind
Yeah.
of got to a saturation point with that, and it was kind of like a little bored, and so I decided to go and do maintenance, like lawns and gutters and stuff in this particular place in the country. Just before I did, this guy like absolutely insisted on coming to see me. Like he's like, I want to see a Czech practitioner, blah blah. I was like, oh, yeah, all right, dude. Like, come, but I'm done with this stuff. And he's like blown out his shoulder, and I said, I had a look at his teeth, and I said, oh, mate, you got a missing, lower six down there. You really need to see a dentist. And I'd heard of this dentist, this dude called Tony, and I said, look, people have been raving about this bloke and telling me how great he is. So why don't you go and see this guy? And so I wrote a referral letter of all things and sent Gary off. And I forgot
Yeah.
about it. I just went
Hmm.
about getting ready to move to the country. And then this wacky dude like rings me up. He's dude, like, I'm very impressed. You knew that was a primary dental problem. You need to come over and see me. And I was just like, oh, mate, like, I'm out of here. But anyway, long story short, I went and saw him, and he said, "Nah, nah, you're not going to clean lawns and gutters. You're coming back to work." And I was like, "Nah, nah, 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 I'm going." He's like, "No, you're not." So then he said, "Come and watch me work." And he was very, very um, non-mainstream what Tony was doing then. That was like, what was that, around 2010, so about 13,
Okay.
14 years ago. um, Tony was doing stuff that was, for then, like, it was underground too, but really out there. um, and Yeah, I was like blown away at what he was doing, so that opened this gateway to like airway and dental work. And I hung around with him for a couple of years, and I started teaching his stuff in the end. And then I taught an osteopath, and the osteopath was the guy that taught me cranial osteopathy. And then I was just kind of like at the point where I was kind of lost my train of thought. Yeah, I was kind of at the point where I was like, people would say, "Well, what do you do?" I was like, "Well, I do breathing work and with kids mostly." And they'd be like, "Yeah, but what are you?" Like chiro, physio, what are you? I was like, "Ah," I was just kind of, yeah. And then so George started teaching me osteopathy, and I was like, "Oh, geez, I'm gonna have to just bite the bullet and do this degree." So like at 38, I signed on to do 5 years of osteopathy training at university, which was interesting, but I got through that. So that's where I ended up. So now I work with a different, like that. Tony, he passed away a few years back, but I work with a dentist, and we literally work in the same room. We put appliances into children, so we use like a removable, just a growth guidance appliance
Hmm.
in children, and we use some more complex appliances in adults. And we will literally work in the same room, and I hold the person's head, and Jalal puts the appliance into the mouth, and I go, "Yep, no, no, we need to, or you need to adjust that. Can we try doing this?" And then I'll be feeling what's actually happening to the person's system. So we're using dental appliances essentially to affect health. Like back to your first question, we're
Sure.
maximizing. So the expression of vitality in cranial osteopathy is how well that cerebral spinal fluid, for want of a better word, how well it's moving, how well it's expressing, right? So when someone has low vitality, you feel their tissues and there's not much movement there. But someone like a kid comes in who's just like woo, woo sort of kid, and you go like, whoa, like fasten your safety belts. This kid's moving. Yeah. That's a measure of vitality, which is a measure of health. So I'm palpating people's like deepest inner expressions of vitality all the time. So what we're doing is we're kind of using the ultimate biohack of using dental appliances to increase vitality. And so that
Cool.
this is a pretty unique thing, especially having the two practitioners like A, understanding each other, B, respecting each other, listening to each other, and then working on for the benefit of the patient. So come back to St. Francis, like both of us have had journeys, and that's what we're doing. We're here to help people. Mm.
That's awesome. Great story. Fantastic. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
it. So, like the goal when you're working with when you're both of yous are working, it's to increase the vitality. So do people come in with the kind of seeking dental help, or do they come in seeking osteopathy? What's kind of like, you know, is it all just so kind of explain that maybe a little further. I think I might just be off a little bit here.
Yeah, so you gotta divide it into two segments. One is kids, which I'm like most passionate about, because I think if, well, we've got to the point, as you know, where our environment that we've constructed is so anti-health that
Yeah. Yeah.
you get kids that are having to grow up in that and adapt to that,
Sure.
right? And not all kids are doing that well in what we've
Mhm.
created, like screens and crap food and poor sleep and busyness, lack of
Mm.
time, all that sort of stuff. So we see a lot of kids with the symptoms or the secondary problems to this kind of lifestyle. So that would be kids that failing to thrive, that have like real dark circles under their eyes and not sleeping properly, with behavior issues, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that they often go hand in hand with malocclusion. So they like, well, their teeth aren't real straight, or their jaws are real narrow, or maybe they've got. We've read about tongue tie, and they think maybe they've got a tongue tie, and that's explaining their behaviour, or they're snoring, or they're big one at the moment with the breathing is the mouth breathing, like their mouth
Mm.
breathing, their mouth's hanging open all the time, that sort of stuff. So yeah, we see a lot of kids. We also see kids that have had like well-meaning treatment, but there's this whole piece in dentistry, functional dentistry at the moment, called airway. So people are trying to expand the front of the face to try and get the airway in the middle of the sort of back of the skull, front of the skull, airways in the middle. Yeah, so they're trying to
Sure.
like expand the front of the face to get the airway. So we see a fair few kids that have had some stuff like that hasn't worked out that well either. So
Interesting.
it's kind of that they're the sort of kids we'll see, and the adults we'll see like a lot of post orthodontic problems, jaw problems, headaches, neck pain, a lot of chronic issues, and chronic sleep problems. Or we see the people that just want to maximize, that are like,
Yeah.
well, I'm looking for the ultimate. I'm looking for way better health. So people that are on that train, on that pathway, seeking like way better health, we do see a fair few of those people too. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
I bet.
that's the kind of demographic we serve. Um, I like doing the kids because the kids are more fun. I'm a bit of a big kid myself, so um,
That's great.
mm,
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. So with the mouth, right? I know like a big topic nowadays, real popular, is like mewing, and like you said, like the
I
people are doing the facial expansion. I've seen people do thumb pulling and things like that, and the mewing is a big one. And so, what are your thoughts on stuff like that, like little practices that you put in your daily life? Is that helpful, or or are you seeing people who come in and are like, well, listen, it's just not getting the results I want?
well, typically they'll end up somewhere like seeing us because they're not getting the results they want. So
Mm,
I guess we see a bit
yeah,
of a skewed population, but
sure.
Mike Mew, what he's talking about essentially is myofunctional therapy. So
Hmm.
uh, we learnt, him and I, we essentially learnt that off the same person, which was this dear lady called Sandra Coulson, who lives in Denver, Colorado. She must be, I don't know how old she is now, in her 80s, and she still travels and teaches, and she still runs like three clinics. And she's like,
No way.
in terms of longevity, yeah, you should
Yeah,
talk.
sustainability there.
Yeah. She just loves it. Just comes down to one thing: loving what you do. That she loves what she does, right? So she was doing this stuff in like the 70s, I think. I can't remember. You'd have to ask her, but she just was doing speech therapy, speech pathology, and she was a gymnast and a dancer, and she was like, well, what about these muscles? Like, no one's training these muscles. So she kind of got on to figuring out different ways of training the muscles themselves in the face. Yeah. And then she started
Mm,
seeing like some crazy results and crazy changes. So she was getting together with a bunch of other people, and it became what they called oral myology, and then it gradually change into something called myofunctional therapy or orofacial myofunctional therapy to be right. So orofacial is obvious. Myo means muscle, functioning muscle therapy. So it's this big complicated name for basically doing funny faces.
Yeah.
But the premise of it is actually quite effective because about 40% of the brain's motor nervous system, so like your motor nervous system, your movement system. So if I want to move my arm, I move my arm, it's voluntary. Some of this stuff is involuntary, yeah, but some of it is also voluntary. So that
Hmm.
40% of the output of the brain, like when you pick up some food and you start chewing on it, like that's a you decide when how much to chew and when to swallow and all that sort of stuff, yeah. So these are complex procedures for the body because you got the potential to be non-compatible with life if you don't chew enough. Makes sense? You
Mm.
choke, yeah? Or you're breathing, or you're speaking. These things are critical to sustainability, to sustaining longevity. You could
Mm.
say. So they're important functions. So what the point is, these muscles around the face and the sensory feedback loops that come back into the brain from that area are super, super highly innovated. Yeah, in other words, there's a lot of neural feedback coming into the brain from those places. Um, so when you train those muscles, they're highly responsive. And so if you've been, say, a mouth breather, with your mouth open, your tongue down, that creates low tongue tone, it creates poor lip tone, it puts the jaw in the wrong spot, it changes your breathing, which changes the length tension on your neck muscles and your chest muscles, and the way the feedback loops work with your rib cage, and blah blah blah. There's a cascade of effects, right? So I've taken kids who, just before I even had osteopathy, I was just training kids breathing, yeah, and
Cool.
I get extraordinary results in kids' lives just by teaching them a simple breathing program. Like
Amazing.
like when I think about it was crazy, really. Like some of the changes we got in kids just from doing something so basic. Um, so the point of myofunctional therapy is that so let's rewind for a sec. Some of those children that I was training, I couldn't fully finish because they just didn't have the strength in the tongue position. So I had to go and learn that stuff, that myofunctional therapy off Sandy. And then I was like, okay, now there's another layer. And then I learned cranial osteopathy. I was like, oh man, there's a whole another layer to this. um, but
Wow.
the point of the mewing and the myofunctional therapy is, yeah, it gets high leverage. It gets things done. You'll get good changes in health by working on those muscles if their function is aberrant. But there's another component to it, which is the thing that those muscles are sitting on, which is your skull, your bones,
Yeah.
right? Um, so that's where my kind of worldview comes in, which is if there's a cranial strain, so a cranial strain is like a compression and then a sort of rotation or an asymmetry that occurs for various reasons in the skull bones. Yeah. So sometimes you'll get compensations, functional compensations for those strains, and that's where you start to not get the results with something like mewing or myofunctional therapy or even breathing retraining or even dentistry. So people go in and they start, pushing and expanding their maxillas and all this sort of stuff. And if the back of the head, because cranial growth actually comes from the back of the head, right? The bone, as the brain grows, it grows the skull, and that actually helps drift the face forward. So if you just work on the face only, you miss the back of the head. You're missing like 60, 70% of the actual issue. Yeah. so so
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, myofunctional therapy, mewing, the face exercises, they don't always overcome those strains so people can move back into pattern. So what you can see, and I've seen this before with even colleagues, and they've sat down and they're speech pathologists, and they do a lot of the training, the myofunctional training. And they go, oh, like, can you have a look at a couple of cases that we're stuck with? Like we've done like this guy, he's gone this far, and they showed me the pictures and stuff, and he definitely improved. Like his face looked heaps better, just squarer, stronger. His symptoms were getting better, but they weren't gone away. And I said, yeah, well, that's because he's got a sphenoid strain. They're like, what? How do you know? And I was like, can't you see the eyes? So he had this quite symmetrical,
Wow.
muscular face, but his eyes were like this, and so
Hmm.
that the sphenoid, which is a bone that runs right through the middle of the face here, when that's on an angle like that, you can see one eye and eyebrow higher than the other, and that throws the temporals with it, so you see the ears different. I said, like that, it's plain as day. He's got a massive cranial strain. This guy was like a military pilot, so he was subject to like huge forces through the skull. And so that's why they couldn't fully win. Yeah. So it's like when you
Cool.
if you're into face exercises, and a lot of people really are, like they're really, really into them, the people I come across. What's
Yeah.
the saying? Like when you only tool you have is a hammer, everything's a nail, right? So I do a lot
Mm.
of woodworking. Sometimes when you need a planer, you don't want a hammer. Makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
don't have the full toolbox either. So other people do. So I refer out to a lot of people as well. Like one of my
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
mates works around the corner, and he does a lot of functional exercise. I used to do that stuff, but he's way better at it than me. And I only have a small room. And I just hold the heads, and then I just send them to him for the exercise stuff. And say, yeah, you need to go and see Mitch. Go and see Mitch. And he thrives on that. So it's important to understand the context, especially like that's what I was saying about trends and stuff I was alluding to before. Like there's lots and lots of hacks, and is whether it's the ice bath or whether it's the mewing or whether it's the tape in the mouth.
Yeah.
Which of these things do you actually need, and which one's going to create the best leverage for you right now to be able to sustain that. Yeah.
Awesome. Dude, that makes it's like everything's just coming together, honestly. Like everything's really coming together. It's amazing. Like, and I liken it to the idea, like I used to try and train my calves a lot in the gym back when I was like, go doing those 5-day splits, and I'd never trained my tibialis muscles, right? So I was training like one side. It'd be like training your biceps without training your triceps. That's what I'm thinking here now. It's like everyone's so focused on the mewing now. If they're okay in the rest of their cranium, their head, right, may not cause as much issues, right? But like all you hear about is the mewing, and it's all focused on the front, right? And I don't know, I think this is extremely valuable, and it's honestly a perspective I've never heard of before. That's really amazing. Like it's really come together here.
Yeah,
um
yeah. Well, we can go deeper on that. It's just that the actual bones are different. So the bones at the front of the face are cartilaginous. So they're actually more malleable than, especially when you're younger, than the ones at the back. They come from membranous bones, so that the backbone, the back of the head, is actually a denser bone, which is again why
hmm,
you can win here, but why you won't always win if there's a problem with the high density stuff in the back here.
yeah.
Say it that way. Yeah, and then you'll probably want to know, well, how do you treat that? It's like,
Yeah, well,
well,
of course.
you just sit in a little room like this and hold people's heads and pray. Nah, there's specific
That's
ways
great.
of doing it, but it's it's too hard to explain on a podcast. But there's
Yeah.
ways of doing it, and you got to find yourself a cranial osteopath or otherwise. I mean, I was talking to one yesterday, someone on LinkedIn. She was sending me heaps of messages. She was in Canada, Alberta, I think. So there's
Okay.
one. She gets it. She works with a dentist.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, you got to find someone like that. So we're like these weird practitioners that sit in like tiny little rooms, and I don't even have a sign. I just literally ordered a sign the other day. I've been in this room for a year and I don't have a sign. And people are like, "Well, you don't have a sign." Oh yeah, sorry about that. Getting around to it. Getting around to
Cool.
it.
Keep it
But I'm
simple.
busy. I'm busy as, and so yeah, you find these cranial osteopaths working away, and we do like really specific work. It's in that sort of spectrum of like everyone's working in their own sort of silo. It's a really specific kind of thing. Takes a while to learn, so you just kind of sit there and feel the rhythm, and then basically try and get the rhythm to express itself better. You have to be humble. You have to be willing to accept that the body is the person that you're treating is a what's the word, like in the Bible it says God made humans in his image. That's
Hmm.
what essentially, like, if you take away the patriarchal meaning to that and basically go, each human is an expression of the divine. Let's look at it that way. That's what we're
Sure.
contacting with cranial osteopathy. The CSF, they used to say, is the seat of the soul. Like Sutherland said that cerebral spinal fluid's the seat of the soul. So when you're working with that fluid, you're working as close to someone's, divine essence, their soul, their uniqueness as possible. So that's why you have to be humble to do that work. You have to be able to acknowledge that it's not the practitioner fixing something. That's a big piece. Like, oh, I fixed this guy and I fixed that guy. No, no, nobody fixed anything. That person's body fixed itself, healed itself. The body has an inherent capacity to heal. Yeah, so you give it the right environment, for that person, and it heals itself. It's like old Bob Worcester and the lobster lady. That's their
Yeah.
environment. That's what that's their ideal, you know, um, situation for them for the body to continually heal themselves and continually regenerate. It was probably drinking a liter of raw milk a day straight out of the cow.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah. So, and the other thing too is with osteo, and you could definitely speak to this, but from my observations with working with practitioners is that it's not like chiro or massage where it's like you need to do it all the time for the rest of your life. Like the vibe that I get is very much like, I've seen two different ones so far. One that was more focused on the cranial work, cranial sacral therapy is what they were talking about, and the other one was a lot more body work. I have had amazing results with both. Um, but they both kicked me out after, you know what I mean? Like they're both like, you're done. This is like, you don't need any more. They say, you can come back if you feel like you need it, right? But they really put the power in my hands, which I really appreciate.
Yeah,
And like you said there, like that's something that we've mentioned a couple times on the podcast, right? It's all individual. Like the individual is healing itself. It's the
that's it.
practitioner is there to help, if anything, right? Like, so yeah, I think that's a really important perspective and one that I like to hear from people that I work with. It is something that really resonates with me. And um, but yeah, I think that's really cool. So, you know, osteopathy, when I think of like the necessity for it now, I think, it's the need for osteopathy really came about because of our lifestyles now, like I would assume, and maybe you have accounts of this or know more about this than me, but I would assume that, somebody living in a primitive environment wouldn't need osteopathy. You know, because they're living in accordance with the proper mechanisms of life. This is my assumption here. Like when you see like Weston A. Price's work, obviously those living the native way had the proper dental structure and all of his observations there. I wonder if you could speak to that at all.
Yeah, well, you see, I don't know about this. I don't know about this primitive philosophy piece. 'Cause I don't
It's
know. I don't know really how healthy those people were. I'm just gonna put this
sure,
laptop on a stand because my neck's getting sore. I need to see the osteopath. That's better. Um, yeah, like they didn't have much longevity. Uh,
sure.
were they really that healthy? Were they really that well adjusted? They were often knocking each other on the head, and you know, like we have this utopia about this primitive thing, and I think like we live in a pretty good time now. Really, like I'm talking to you on the internet,
Mhm.
like we're sharing
Yeah.
ideas. We can get pretty good food. I just got some spring water, that's brought down and pumped into the office, and like
Well,
pretty damn cushy. We can drive around in our cars and go long distances without destroying our bodies. And like if someone does become incapacitated for whatever reason, they can be looked after, not kicked out. Yeah, I don't know about that whole philosophy. um
hmm,
were they in harmony with the circadian cycle? Yeah, and with seasons, and with a lot more probably with nature, depending on who it is. Like, so there's the indigenous people that
sure.
are here, the First Nations of here, and also, in Canada, like those type of traditions, I think were super in tune with nature, in harmony with nature, and could read
Mhm.
nature and literally talk to nature, and had initiation processes through nature. I think some of that stuff is way healthier than what we have today. Um, Weston A. Price, like, yeah, his book's called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. Obviously, everyone knows that. But is it just nutrition? Do you reckon?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
Because
Yeah.
if you take a twin,
There's more than just that.
yeah, because he was looking at twins, right? So if you take a twin who's grown up in a traditional society and then you put them in to a westernized society, yeah, they're eating crappier food. But
Hmm.
what else is there? Like they're not getting the sunlight, but also like if you take a twin, you separate them from their other twin and put them in a really cruddy environment, they're under a huge amount of emotional stress. And I
Yeah.
don't know, like I ended up not really like confessions. I bought the book because everyone had to buy the book, and I didn't really read the whole book, and I gave it away. So I don't know. Does he go into the emotional component, the stress component in that book?
You know what? No, he does not, and that's actually a big criticism of his work that I've heard in this area, and the idea that it's not necessarily just the nutrients that's playing a role, right? Like it's obviously, that was his focus, right? So that's all that was really talked about was the nutrients and the vitamin A and maybe the vitamin D and eventually getting into the cod liver oil, which is a big trend. But
Mm.
yeah, it was not like the emphasis on community, what aspect that would have, or just the lifestyle factors, right? Like just the way that
Community,
you
but
kind of
also
move through
like
life.
in terms of those jaws growing too. What about chewing?
Mm,
because
yeah.
because as you move your jaws and your mouth, it pulls on the muscles, and the muscles pull on the bone, and that creates a lot of the growth, craniofacial growth. So if
Mhm.
they were, I don't know if they were kids when they were taken and put into these societies. I'm assuming they were younger. Well, they would have had like way softer food and way less chewing, and been under stress and not breathing properly. Well, there you go. That's a recipe before you even talk about the food. Yeah, the food is important. I'm not denying that, but there's other factors. It's a
Yeah.
multifactorial thing. So yeah, was the primitive society? It depends. I guess it depends how you define it, how long ago and where, and what type of
Sure. Yeah.
philosophy
It's
they were living under.
yeah.
Were they necessarily healthier? Maybe, maybe not. There's things that we can take. We'll say it this way: our body bodies grew and adapted to live under certain conditions. I think this is the key, the crux to that whole philosophy or that whole lens. And
Mhm.
the way we're living now is progressed at such a rapid rate that our bodies can't, for want of a better word, evolution, if that's a word, evolutionarily catch up to that environment that we've pushed ourselves into. Yeah, so we go
Interesting.
back
Yeah.
to, okay, what were those people doing? Eating whole foods, being exposed to sunlight, going to sleep when it's dark. These are the basics premises of health. Yeah,
Mm.
it's really it's simple stuff at the end of the day. Like if you can't
Yeah.
recognize the food, you probably don't eat it. When the sun goes down, go to sleep. When the
It's
sun comes
intuitive.
up, get up, move your body, drink water that's not stagnant. You know,
Yeah.
um, pretty basic stuff. So that is that foundations for health. Well, probably if you took someone who had no idea of health per se and you started coaching, it was probably some of the first stuff you do. Hopefully, and so that's
Hopefully.
that's what those people were doing. So that's why
Yeah.
they had good jaws and good structure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always think too, actually, this has been a topic that's come up a few times on the social media, like um, just being indoors versus being outdoors. You mentioned drinking and running water. I think stagnant air is one of the biggest problems, and I think it contributes to our poor facial development too, right? If your sinuses are going to be inflamed or full of mucus, it's a lot harder to breathe through them, right? So, I
What
think
about
that's a huge factor, right? That Weston A price, probably could have talked about too, right? So there was a lot that was missed there, but yeah, I think that's a big part of it.
yeah, stagnant fluid in the body, But
Yeah,
I think you're right. Like,
beautiful. Yeah,
I don't know if do you live in a house or apartment?
house. Yeah.
In a house, yeah. So like I've been to like I go to Sydney a lot for work, and which is a big city. I don't live in a big city. I live in the country. Um, and so you go and stay on the sixth floor or something like that in a little tiny box. And there's an air conditioner unit, but so you can't open the windows. It's like well, we're in a hotel or something. But literally,
Yeah.
like the carbon dioxide in that's why I kept opening this door up because I was like, whoa, can't breathe in here because in a small room, carbon dioxide levels literally rise up, right? And so you're
Hmm.
essentially poisoning yourself. So I don't know how people live in these apartments on the 10th floor and 20th floor in these little boxes and just run aircon all day long. Like I can't do it. But yeah, of course you're going to end up with stagnant fluid in your airways. Your body's trying to clean itself constantly of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's that I think you're right. Like I cannot sleep without airflow. Like if I sleep in a stuffy room, I just like have the worst sleep. I have to have airflow. I have to have a door open, even when it's colder. Mm.
Yeah. No, and well, the two times I've been the most sick in my life was my first year university where I stayed in the res, and
Yeah,
obviously my habits were really poor, but it was just a little room, right? And I was living with my one of my best buddies there and in the same room. Anyways, the other time was the next year, and we were living in an apartment together again with another fella. Same thing, couldn't open the windows, and yeah, it's just got stagnant over time. Funny enough, I just went on a cruise actually with my family, and the room we were staying in had no window.
Eesh.
And I'll tell you, it was a tough week. It was difficult, right? There was not only were we not getting light in the morning, and I know light through a window is different, but at least getting the perception of light in the morning is one thing, right? I have to wake up and run to the rooftop just to get some sun. And but anyways, it was challenging. Like, and it was challenging, and definitely did not feel up to snuff there. It was congested to say the least. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. You said your body's trying to clean itself out. Well, if the air, stagnant air is not filtered, right? It's not filtering itself, it's not cleaning itself. So it's gonna get trapped in your lungs, right? It's not native. That's not native, right? I'll take that perspective. Stagnant air is not something that's natural, right? Until, recently, where we've really
Like anything
had
is,
our
it's
houses closed off.
yeah, yeah.
But
Well, stagnation. AT Still, the founder of osteopathy, said, "Show me stagnation, I'll show you the basis of disease."
yeah, I love
So
that.
that's exactly what you're talking about because, think about while you're asleep, about the glymphatic system. So the glymphatics
Yeah,
is the name given to the lymphatics fluids traveling up into the brain while you're asleep. They clean your brain off, stop you from getting plaques like Alzheimer's, like forming, neurodegenerative forming um, plaques
wow.
and problems. So your lymphatics travel up in your brain, they clean all that crap out, and then they drain out before you wake up. Well, what happens if you're congested? What happens if your whole skull is compressed and strained and twisted, for want of a better word? It's not quite the right word, but what happens is you minimize that drainage. And so then you end
Mm,
up like puffy and snotty and coughing in the morning and all that sort of stuff, feeling like crap. Now, this happens a lot to kids. So we see, as I said, we see a lot of kids and they're not draining properly. You get them draining
sure.
properly, all of a sudden their vitality goes up. Why? Because you're decreasing that stagnation. The other big phrase in osteopathy is life is motion. So you're
Yeah,
right on, and you're right on there about the primitive thing, because that it was like, it's basically like move or die. Like if
yeah,
you're just going to
yeah.
sit there and go, you know what, I'm just going to crack a beer, I'm not going to go hunting today. It's like, well, there's about 20 people that just are relying on you to go hunting, so you better move your sorry ass and get out there. Yeah, like we just don't have that. Oh, I might go down the market. Like, mate, they crack them
Yeah,
up
not
when I
gonna work.
in Texas. When you go into the supermarket and there's like all the trolleys lined up, and you can just grab your trolley and you go in. And well, in there they had all the trolleys lined up, and then they had all the mobility carts lined up for the people
Oh
that
yeah.
could. Yeah, so they'd just like stagger into the thing and then jump on this little cart and drive around the supermarket. I'm like, holy crap. Wow. Like there was about 5 or 6 of them lined up.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's pretty standard too in North America at least.
Well, we're
Yeah.
harsh down here. Like, get in there, walk around. But that's it. Like that's the level. So there's where the primitive argument comes in, right? So life is motion, and modern life is stagnation, isn't it? Like here we are sitting. Like if you sit for longer than 30 minutes, which is happening to us right now, it's happening to me. I
Yeah.
don't know. You're younger than me. I'm like 47. How old are you?
23.
23, man, you're one of those guys I was talking about before that can just do anything.
Yeah.
Ripped.
Try and
But
focus on the longevity though, at least.
yeah, well, that's easy when you're 23.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get the freaking eye thing, man. Like, that's really pissing me off. Like where you get real small text and you're like, I have to do the like pushing it away from me shit. Oh, man. I never thought that would happen to me, I tell you. But yeah, maybe that whole like life is motion principle um, is really the crux of the paleo or primitive argument versus modern life. So that's what I was talking about. After half an
Mhm.
hour of eating, you actually make inflammatory cytokines in your joints in your body. And so after
Interesting.
half an hour of sitting, you start to get a signal like my back is sore or my ass is sore. And that's because those inflammatory cytokines are activating what we call the nociceptors, the pain receptors, and they're telling you to get the fuck up, right? To stand up and move, right? But like, oh well, I can't because I'm at work, and someone sit there for 8 hours a day, not moving, and then they
Mm,
go home and then they sit and they eat and they sit in the bus or their car and then they sit and watch the TV and then they lie down and there's this like pure like all the fluids, all the joint beds and all that stuff. It's all supposed to move and be moving constantly. Yes, it's supposed to relax as well. But even
yeah.
like just something I learned the other day, simple stuff like your shoulder hangs down like this all day, right? Like hangs down your body in gravity. But when we sleep, we're instead of using soft, fluffy pillows, we're supposed to use our arm. So then our arm gets in the opposite position for 8 odd hours in the day. So then the shoulder capsule stays healthy. Isn't that interesting?
Mm,
But it's like it's
there's-
uncomfortable. And I don't want to give up my pillows. You
that's it,
know,
right? Yeah,
they're so
yeah,
soft. It's just like all that. You know what it's like, the cold exposure and all that. I mean, I hate doing that stuff, but I know it makes me feel better.
mm, yeah. You never regret it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah. Yeah, and I guess maybe we could touch on sleep in a little bit, right? Like, the soft it's funny, eh? Everything's soft, everything's soft. Like you said, like you are down there, you say, go into the grocery store and you may as well walk around, right? We're real soft over in North America. I'll say that, and I've traveled a little bit recently, and you could certainly see, over in Europe there, it's like it's a whole different group of people, right? You don't have the same, you have different problems, I think, but you don't have the same rates of disease and obesity and stuff like that. But the cities aren't even set up in the same way as they are here. Like, um, it's everything's very walkable. Everybody does walk for the most part, right? And yeah, definitely, you only see the obese
Or
people at the
cycling.
tourist sites, but
In Europe, they ride bikes a lot.
yeah, bikes too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a lot more movement. But yeah, so sleeping, you know, I've been trying to figure this out too, and I've asked a lot of people, right? So is sleeping on your back, you mentioned this on your arm over the head. That's interesting one too. Like, what kind of is a hard mattress better? I would assume so, but but maybe some little tips on that.
Yeah. Um, well, I hate those soft mattresses. Like at the moment, like I do travel a little bit too, and you go to Airbnb, and it's really popular to have those or hotels are popular to have this ridiculously soft mattress that you just like, I don't know, like, oh no, here we go. I'm gonna have a bad night's sleep already. I know that much. So yeah,
Yeah.
a firmer mattress definitely for me, my mind is better. Sleeping on the floor, I don't sleep too bad on the floor. In fact, when I have those ludicrously soft mattresses, I'll just like fold the quilt over and put it on the floor because I can't stand sleeping like a banana.
Yeah.
So yeah, it
Yeah.
is important, but really, like sleep quality is really critical. And so that starts with
Mm,
your sleep, what they call sleep hygiene. You're familiar with that phrase?
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like making sure you got airflow, making sure that before you go to bed, all the overhead lights are off. They're starting to kill me now. So the sun's come up. Um, Making sure all that you're in a dark environment before you go to sleep. Making sure you're not on your phone and on the computer, which we all do, but still, it's important to try not to do that.
Yeah.
Making sure you're emotionally calm, making sure you haven't had like some sort of cake or sweet thing, um, all those things feed into the sleep hygiene, which set yourself up. And then when you're asleep, I mean, it's something I've struggled with myself personally for a long time. um, and that's to do with structure. Actually, it's to do with the skull and and those birth strains that I was telling you about. So it's kind of like, when the healer heal thyself. Like we tend to find the things that we need as people, and then oftentimes we become the practitioner of that. If you're so inclined. So for me, actually, cranial osteopathy is that. It's something that I should have had when I was a kid, because I look at photos of me as a baby and I can pick all the strains now, and I'm like, far out. Like, no one. They said I used to cry a lot. No wonder, because I would have had a headache constantly. Like, I had terrible, shocking birth strains, and so
Sure.
they kind of set me up for like sleep disorder, breathing, sleep apnea, snoring, that sort of stuff. So as a kid,
Mm.
like, I used to wake up just totally screwed. Like, I'd wake up just like, like completely unrested, really tired, like didn't want to get out of bed. I would sleep till 11 or 12 as a kid if I was allowed to. If I was left, I'd just be like, I remember Dad taking care of me. Mum was away, and he brought me a cup of tea at like 6:30, because he always made 2 cups of tea, so he made one for me instead of Mum. And he dumped it, and I was like, yeah, thanks. And I put it on the windowsill and woke up at 11. Like,
Yeah.
for a 12, 13-year old, 14-year-old kid, like, that's worrying. That's alarming.
Mm.
Like, just that you
Yeah.
wake up at 7 and then just fall back asleep and wake up at 11 a.m. Like, it's almost in the middle of the day. Well, that's what sleep disorder breathing does to you. So making sure that by day you've done your breathing work, and that your breathing pattern is good, and that your nose breathing, and that your tongue's in the right spot. There's the mewing, and strong and
Mhm.
sitting on the top of your mouth, and that you can breathe slow and deep. That's really important to sleep as well,
Mm.
because obviously, like, and then you've got the drainage, like I said. So you've got the lymphatics running up, and you've got the drainage. So one of the things that we do, Jalal and I do in the dentistry, is we make what we call a pivot splint. So we have, basically, this is going back to that guy original. Remember, I was telling the story about the guy that I
Mhm.
referred to. He said, "No, you're
Yes,
not
yeah.
doing maintenance." Yeah, well, he spent a long time figuring all this bizarre stuff out, and they found out that, essentially, a bit like the Ayurvedic body typing systems, where you've got the, help me out, Pitta,
Yeah,
Kapha,
the
Vata.
Pitta, Vata, yeah,
Yeah.
I think one
Well,
more. Yeah.
yeah, basically, he found this out in terms of colors. That we have red, green, and blue in our eyes. These colors for the video, I held up the colors, um, and basically, people have a dominant color type: red, green, and blue. And then what he found was that we all grind our teeth according to our primary color type. So there's a specific pattern for the red primaries, a specific pattern for the greens, and a specific pattern for the blues. So what we do with our little splints is we devise certain contacts on certain teeth that alleviate the cranial pressure or compression in that person. And so what I do is I wear these little red. I'm a red primary. I wear the pivots at night. So if I do clench down, what actually happens is, and I've tested this now by feeling people's heads, is it actually decompresses the skull, so it allows for that fluid flow and stuff. So it's
Amazing.
pretty,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So that's one of our key kind of cornerstones of treating, particularly those chronically ill individuals that are seeking our help, 6 to 9 months on these pivots. And I'd had them like 10 odd years ago. And then I showed Jalal the system, and he's like, yeah, I can do that. Like, he's real smart practitioner. He picks things up like
Oh,
crazy quick, and he understands them. He
wow.
literally like embody understands, not just intellectual. And he's like, yeah, we can
Hmm.
do that. And anyway, he made me a set. I was one of the first sort of issues of pivots, and I put them in, and my body, I just went like this. Oh, I was like, oh, so immediate like relaxation. So that's another to deal with, this modern environment, stuff like that can make a huge difference. But other
Hmm.
types of dental appliances can actually lock that mechanism up. And so what that's the beauty of what we do, because I'm feeling whether or not the mechanism is being locked up or not. And he's making sure that it fits the mouth, but I can tell you straight away, no, that's not working, or that
Hmm.
is working. Yeah. So that's really important, because if the dental appliances is locking up the cranium and you go to sleep, you miss all that drainage and you struggle to breathe, and you may as well just be in a windowless room.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really cool. Yeah, the osteo like using the osteopathy to get that feedback to really read the body, and I like that. That's really cool. Really, really cool. So one final note, one final thing I want to bring up is because I talked about this on my Instagram, mouth tape. Like, is it the
Ah,
solution? I kind of like. I guess I'll share a little bit of what I think, and please correct me with your knowledge, please, because you know I think it's not a long term solution, but I think in extreme cases it could be beneficial because you see from what I've read is that you really can see the detriment of breathing through your mouth. So if you can stop it, I think that's helpful. Um, but I want to hear your thoughts on that. I don't think it's a long-term solution. I think you should definitely wean off it. But yeah, definitely. I want to hear what you have to say there.
yeah, well, I think you're right about that. It's not a long term solution, um, because you have to straight away ask the question, well, why are you breathing through your mouth at
Hmm.
night?
Sounds yes.
Yeah. So why is that? You tell me a few of the reasons why people breathe through the mouth at night.
Yeah, probably poor posture, poor facial structure. I would say stagnant air is another one that I'm thinking that is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So those two out of three of those pretty easy to fix. Open a window and get a little bit stronger and move your body. Yeah.
Yeah,
But one of the main reasons is obstruction, essentially. So
yeah,
so if your nose is blocked, then you're going to want to breathe through the mouth, right?
yeah,
So if you then tape your mouth, you've then just kind of taped up the sort of idiot override system.
for sure. Yeah, well put.
Yeah. And so then your body's actually, to be honest, like all jokes aside, your body's actually really then struggling to breathe. Okay. So if
Yeah,
you
fair
then
enough.
force that, um, it's kind of like what's coming to me is like a picture of a busy freeway, and
Yeah,
and then there's someone in over there. It'd be the left lane. Over here, it's the right lane. In the fast lane, going like 60 kilometers an hour. When it's supposed to be 110. It just screws up the like for kilometers. It screws up the whole flow of traffic, right?
hmm.
So forcing yourself to be that car in the slow lane when everything is going fast. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yep.
Is what the mouth taping does, because your body actually wants to probably rev the system a bit to keep you alive. So what happening is when you mouth tape, then you actually start increasing pressure in the pulmonary system. You actually start increasing. It's called pulmonary hypertension. So by forcing and laboring breathing, you actually start to create
Mhm.
tension, and that can create tension on the heart. Yeah. So then the real scaremongers will say, well, that could lead to right side heart failure, but you'd have to do it for a long, long time. And
Sure.
I've
Yeah.
seen sleep study results actually with mouth taping where the O2 sats drop right down, which is
Mm.
also really dangerous. Yeah. So the point is, if there's a problem at that end, and you've got your mouth hanging wide open, or you're snoring, whatever, like what is going on there? And then one of the main things that occurs is a lack of what we call intraoral volume, which is where these airway guys get excited. So your jaw, mandible size should be is kind of mirror of your tongue size. Yeah, so you got
Mm.
a medium sized mandible jaw, and so your tongue will be medium sized. So you want your dental arches, the arch of the width of your mouth, to be kind of medium sized to match that tongue. Yeah, so the tongue should fit into the oral cavity. If the oral cavity is narrow, the tongue is looking for room, and what tends to happen is it'll tend to drop to the back of the airway, the back of the throat, back of the pharynx, or posteriorly a little bit, let's say, in order to try and find space. But then that then impedes your airway a little bit, which is probably okay when you're upright, but when you're supine and you're sleeping, it creates problems. Yeah. So that's
Sure.
often one of the big drivers. So then if you then tape your mouth, and then you're really forcing your body to work pretty hard. But that said, if you don't have some of those issues and it's simply a functional habitual thing, and you tape your mouth and you go, oh my God, I feel terrific for doing that, then that's simple. You just got to retrain your breathing. That takes about 2 months to do, and you'll
Sure.
feel a hell of a lot better. I mean, that's what I did, man. Like, so I was like 34, and I found all this stuff out. I went on a course. This dentist was talking about breathing. He put up the symptoms for the kids that don't breathe well. I was like, holy crap, that's me, like now, but also as a kid, that was me. I was
Yeah.
like, it's one of those moments where you just have a blinding flash of the obvious. That's why I'm passionate about helping kids, because I grew up like sick. Although I was apparently, like, on the outside, I was healthy, but I grew up really sick. Um,
Mm.
and uh, what was I saying? Ah, it's early in the morning here.
Yeah. Yeah. Working with kids and oh, you were
Before
on
that.
the breathing to
Yeah,
recorrect
yeah. So
your.
what happened was, I went on that course, realized that was me, and then I went back and I was like, well, okay. I looked at what they were doing, what we call pacing, which is like getting kids to hold their breath and walk around the room. I don't personally love that as a breathing retraining, but I took that idea of increasing CO2 and retaining it. So that's
Mm.
basically like exercising while nose breathing, and I love that. It's
Mm.
if you can't go for like a 5K run at a moderate pace, just only nose breathing, teach yourself to do it. If you're lifting in the gym and you just like, teach yourself to nose breathe while you lift. That's the best thing you can do. So it's essentially what I did, and I retrained my breathing because we used to live at the top of about 300 stairs. I lived on an island at that time, so we'd drive the boat and then be about 300 steps to the house. So whatever I was carrying, I decided to nose breathe. So if it was a backpack, and a light backpack, or like a whole wardrobe, like, you still had to hold up these steps, right, off the boat. So I
Mm.
do that nose breathing, and then within a couple of months, I'd retrain my breathing, and then boom, like, then I could start to think properly. I had more energy. Like, it was totally transformational. It was wild how much better I felt. So rather than, yeah, you might tape your mouth and go, wow, I feel better. Well, that's an indicate really good sign that you can do some breathing retraining, and you'll be sweet as. Yeah. If you tape your
Oh,
mouth, you go like, oh, I hate this and I can't, and you rip it off, and you wake up like feeling scared or whatever, that's a sign that you got something else going on.
sure.
Yeah, so it
Super
always
cool,
comes
man.
down to why. Like the body's not silly. The body has opened your mouth and it's snoring for a reason. It's functional. It's actually a functional adaptation.
Well, this honestly um, is, I think, extremely valuable. Just because I see the shift, you see the shift in the young people too now, right? With the mewing and they call it the looks maxing and stuff like that. You see,
Yeah,
tape your mouth and wear the nasal strips and pull your, I don't know if that's good or not, but like I'm sure it's, it's really understanding. And I think the point that I want to highlight here is understanding that it's more than just the front, like you were mentioning, it's everything, right? If you're gonna, and it's not even just the head, right? It's not even just neck up, it's the whole body. Everything is connected, right? So, um, just isolating that one thing, it's like if you go do bicep curls every day, for the next couple of years, well, you're probably going to end up developing some problems, right? So if you're just training your jaw and you're not training the back or you're not training the neck or whatever it may be properly, I think
yeah,
something to consider at least.
something to
Yeah.
consider. And don't get me wrong either. Like I'm not a grumpy old man sitting here saying like, you know, it's all bad, bad, bad. Because you brought
Yeah, you
up one thing
don't get that vibe.
about your younger crew, which I love, is that back when I was 23, it was all about rugby and drinking beer, and we didn't give a shit what we ate, But
Yeah.
there's this whole crew of younger people like yourself in their 20s that are embodying the wisdom of health, all right? And doing these practices and eating real clean and moving and being conscious of light and being conscious of spirituality. Like, wow, like I love that. I love that there's people like yourself out there doing this stuff and popularizing it and talking about it in a sensible way and asking questions. It's just awesome, man. So thanks for the work
Great.
that you're doing. I'm not just like Mr. Grumpy old dude sitting here. I'm really
No,
respectful.
you're not giving that vibe off at all. Don't worry. No, that's great. Hey, listen, I really appreciate you coming on. I really think this is extremely valuable. Like, I wish I could have everyone listen to this episode, honestly, because it's been really enlightening for me and I'm sure for a lot of people.
Cool,
Yeah,
man.
thank you.
Pleasure to chat.
Yeah, great. And I just want you to like take a moment and share maybe how some people can reach you and find the work that you're doing if they can work with you or things like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a bit hard to work with me if you're not down here. But what I do have is actually this might appeal to a lot of people listening. Um, is I have a really comprehensive course, online course, because you got to have an online course. Everyone's got an online
Of
course. I
course.
got I'm still waiting to make all those multi millions of dollars from it though. But
Oh yes, that'll come, eh?
oh, cool. Well, now that I've been on your show, so yeah, no, but actually, what it is I got really sick of people telling me all this stuff like, oh, I'm teaching breathing now. I'm a breath worker, but someone had a panic attack in my class or something like that, and I'm like, well, do you know why? And they're like, no, and I was like, well, I'll tell you why. And they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that." Yeah, the breath worker didn't know that piece. So I had this repetitively, and I got annoyed, and I was like, "Right, I'm making a course." So it's called Baseline Breathing, and so what it is about 40 videos where I just go through like the actual anatomical, physiological, neurophysical, and even a little bit spiritual aspects of breathing. So when
Hmm.
you do like your Wim Hof breathing, what are you actually physiologically, anatomically, and neurophysiologically doing? And if you do the opposite, you take a real slow breathing, or you do your meditative breathing, whatever it is. What are you actually anatomically, physiologically, and neurophysiologically doing? Like, what are you doing to your system? So if you actually understand that, then you understand when to use which breathing modality for which person, because you actually fully understand the basics. So if you don't get that baseline of breathing right, then you're not going to improve sleep, even if you do Wim Hof
Mm,
breathing. You know what I mean? So this basically just takes people through, coaches, trainers, therapists, that sort of stuff. The actual basics of breathing in a pretty simple way, and not too simple. Like it's deep, but it's logical, and um, people who've taken that have found that they've got like quite good results in terms of their understanding and also then their physiologic responses to breathing. Um, so that's on my website, which is just my name, coleclayton.com.au for Australia. You can go on there. That you can get a couple of Zoom sessions, I think, with that one. So the idea was to kind of learn about the breathing and then create your own breathing program from that. And so I can help you create your breathing program or help you understand the material. The last guy that took it, he just wanted in person sessions, so he got like some big cranial sessions, and we really released up some of those. Remember, I said cerebral spinal fluid, breathing, and circulation. So he was trying to do the breathing, but his cerebral spinal fluid was super locked up. So we released
mm,
that, and he just took off. He is about your age too. So when you have that vitality just sitting there and it's really potent and it's not been able to be expressed and you help it express, bang, like body takes off. So yeah, you can come and do that in person if you're ever in Byron Bay, and that's where I live and work. Or you can meet me on that coleclayton.com.au. I guess there's Instagram. The young guy, you youngies are always into the Instagram. I don't post on there very much. I should do more, but yeah, Instagram annoys me. But you can follow me there, Cole Clayton Osteopath.
cool. All right, that's great. We'll put a couple links down in the show notes there for everyone
Yeah,
listening. All right, and I want to thank you guys for listening. Everyone should know that this is not medical advice or osteopathic osteopathy advice is not enough. This is just informational purposes only. But just remember that we're all responsible, sovereign beings capable of thinking, criticizing, and understanding absolutely anything. We, the people and the greater forces, together are self healers, self governable, self teachers, so much more. Please reach out if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, whatever it may be. You can reach me at beyond.terrain on Instagram is the best place to reach me. And yeah, if you enjoyed the podcast, found it informative, should give us a review, share, like, comment, whatever it is on your platform you're listening to. And yeah, that really is the best way to support me at this point. So, oh yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Just remember there's two types of people in this world, those who think they can, those who think they can't, and they're both correct. All right, take care, guys.